Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, May 20th, 2025, and our friend Colonel Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back,
Good to
Larry.
be with you, Nina, as always. I don't see Larry Johnson. Where is he?
We're going to meet him on
On
Friday.
Friday. Okay.
Colonel, let's get started. I'm going to get just used to Colonel because when we do the with Larry, it's just somehow getting confused.
Yeah. Larry
And
1 and Larry 2.
Colonel, the situation with Iran right now is somehow so much confused when you look at the way that the Trump administration is dealing with. And because so far we thought that Steve Witkoff would somehow be the voice of reason in the government, in the administration, that would bring some sort of insight from the mindset of the Trump administration. But here is what he said. I want to know what's your take on what he's offering.
Well, the president has been very clear. He wants to solve this conflict diplomatically and with dialogue. And he's given all the signals. He's directly sent letters to the supreme leader. I have been dispatched to deliver that message as well, and I've delivered it. But on the other hand, we have one very, very clear red line, and that is enrichment. We cannot allow even 1% of an enrichment capability. We've delivered a proposal to the Iranians that we think addresses some of this without disrespecting them. And so that's important. We want to get to a solution here, and we think that we will be able to. But everything begins from our standpoint, John, with a deal that does not include enrichment. We cannot have that because enrichment enables weaponization, and we will not allow a bomb to get here. But short of that, there are all kinds of ways for us to achieve our goals in this negotiation. We think that we will be meeting sometime this week in Europe, and we hope that it will lead to some real positivity, and that's where we are, sir.
Carl, when you look at here is what the supreme leader of Iran responded to to the argument on the part of the Trump administration. He said the Trump administration should stop talking nonsense. For them to say we won't allow Iran to enrich uranium is utter nonsense. We are not waiting for anyone's permission. We'll pursue this. And the foreign minister of Iran said the same thing, that it doesn't matter if they get a deal or not, they're going to continue enriching uranium. But they can talk about the way, the limits on the enriching uranium. Your take on what's going on in the Trump administration, because somehow today I talked with Professor Morandi, they're so confused, they don't know what they're talking about. Each and every time coming out with a new rhetoric.
Witkoff just destroyed, with that and other remarks he's made that are similar to that, my impression, and it was only an impression, and I was looking for ramification of that impression, reinforcement of that impression, but he just destroyed my impression, my knowledge that he's a diplomat. He is sucking up to what everyone else in the Trump administration ultimately sucks up to, and that is the perplexity, the confusion, the mercurial nature, the non-steadfast approach of Donald Trump. He's become a clone of Donald Trump with just those short remarks you played there, because he has been all over the map. How could Iran have any trust whatsoever in what this man says from now on? Because he has been all over the map in the three meetings to this point, and he's been all over the map in indirect talks. I found out this morning there have been no direct talks. There have been a couple of remarks shared, but there have been no direct talks, as there should be. And at least one set of these talks ought to, maybe outside the framework, include an invitation from Tehran for Witkoff to come to Tehran and sit down and talk in Tehran. That hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened because this is an amateur hour presidency, particularly with regard to diplomacy. Iran's absolute will not drop, will not fall off position is very clear, just as Putin's is with regard to Ukraine, but no one will listen with ears to hear. It is that they are a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They signed up to the additional protocol. They signed up to the Safeguards Agreement. During the JCPOA, the IAEA could find no violations of significance to what they said they would do while remaining in the NPT with the privileges that that gives them. So we're going to tell them that even though they are signatory to all these binding agreements and subject to the inspections of the IAEA, that they're different. They're different. They can't do what they have spent. And here's a key. Billions of dollars to develop and blood against that tyrant to the north in Israel to secure. Murdered scientists, blown up centrifuges, assassinations galore of their nuclear scientists. They've spent blood and billions, B squared, in order to do what they're doing, and it is perfectly permissible within the treaty regime that we supposedly support. Whereas that bastard state up there called Israel isn't even a member and isn't doing anything in that regard. So if I were Iran, I would tell Witkoff and the U.S. to take a hike. We're not talking to you any further. Now they won't, because they don't want war. They've been clear about that too. They do not want war. And secondary to that, they want a relief of the sanctions. Trump in the Middle East in his talks, talking to the GCC and talking to Mohammed bin Salman and Mohammed bin Zayed and others. Look at Iran. Iran's a basket case economically, and you all are thriving. Why do you think they're a basket case, Donald Trump? Because U.S. sanctions are draconian. Why do you think you forced them in the arms of China and Russia and are going to force them even deeper into that embrace? Because that's the only way they can survive. Because you have so sanctioned them. Look at what happened to Syria. What happened to Syria in part was due to U.S. sanctions. And it remains to be seen if that's a positive development. I hope it is. I hope it continues the way it is. U.S. sanctions are relieved and Syria has finally some prospects for the future. But Iran just wants the same thing. The other thing I've heard from the administration now is that they think, and I think I know who they are, they think that Iran, having had the axis of resistance destroyed around it, Hezbollah, Syria, the Houthis. I objected to that this morning when somebody told me, well, the Houthis are down too. The Houthis aren't down. They're still doing exactly what they were doing before. That Iran is weak, extremely weak, and has to do whatever we tell them to do. That's a terrible position to take in the negotiations because that's not the way Iran looks at it. That's not at all the way they look at it. Further, they think that, as I do, that the recent destabilization over the killing of the woman and abuse of women in general and other things and the women's movement in Iran, that the government has been delegitimized. Well, there's a certain truth to that. But then you have to throw out the reality. Remember 1980, 81 in there when Saddam decided that the revolution in Iran had made them extremely weak and it was a very good time for him to invade, and then he got his ass handed to him? Well, what you do when you invade a country or you bomb a country relentlessly, like we would have to do, is you solidify that population, that 85 to 90 million people, and they hate you, not their government. And that's what we would do. So this is the most amateur hour negotiating diplomatic team I've ever seen take to the field. In fact, I wouldn't even grace them with that term. They are not a diplomatic team. They're a herd of characters who don't know what the hell they're doing. And Witkoff has become one of that herd.
Larry, do you see Donald Trump? Because you mentioned his visit to Saudi Arabia and then UAE and Qatar. He said somehow he changed his rhetoric. He said before he was talking about if we can get a deal with Iran or we're gonna attack them. And in the Middle East said we're gonna get a deal or we're not gonna let them selling any oil. Why is that changing in the mind of Donald Trump? Is he feeling that he cannot get a deal with Iran because of the pressure he's receiving from, I don't know, whoever is that is from Israel, from Israeli lobby, from the establishment? What's your take on that?
Either he's getting some really bad information from some of the sources you just identified, the neocons, for example, Rubio, for example, or he's just stupid. And I'm increasingly of the mind that it's both, but the latter really takes precedence. The man doesn't listen. He doesn't read. He doesn't pay attention. He bounces from one issue to another issue like a ping pong ball. And his criterion for bouncing is how much is in it for me, money-wise, for me and my family. So that's no way to go about negotiations of this serious nature. And I might just say the same thing about Ukraine. And ultimately, I'd say the same thing about Gaza. This is not the leadership we need at this time. The reality of what would happen if we didn't get a deal, let's just say we even go into a phase 2, that we don't get one before August, let's say. It's just too painful for the Iranians, too painful for us. We actually exercise some diplomacy. They do too. And we get to a point where both sides are saying something like, well, we need a phase 2. We didn't do it in the first phase. We need a phase 2. Well, what are you going to do about the snapback sanctions and the E3? What are you going to do about those people? Not just the UN sanctions, which will snap back. You can maybe take care of that, except guess who's coming into the presidency of the Security Council at that time? Russia. Maybe you could get that done, though, but you still got the E3 sanctions. You still got the European sanctions. And we aren't on really the best terms in the world with Europe right now. Although Europe is concerned about Iran's program, they're probably not as concerned about it as we are. So are they going to do what we need them to do? Probably not. So you're just pushing this down the road into intractable territory for successful negotiations. So ultimately, Donald, you're going to get what you say you don't want. You're going to get a war. And in this whole time, if Bibi's government hasn't collapsed, which I think is probably at least a 50-50 chance of, and we don't have new leadership in Israel, and we haven't brought the hammer down on the genocide and the starvation in Gaza, then you've got Israel to worry about starting something, because they're going to see, well, they're going to a phase 2, and maybe the sanctions are going to be lifted at least partially, or maybe that's a product of a phase 2. Can't let this happen. So they start the war. So you're playing with real fire here, and you don't have diplomats with any fire extinguishers. And it's really worrisome to see this happening, because I know what's going to result if we do go into conflict. We're going to lose, and we're going to lose big time. Iran's going to lose too. There's no question about that. There's going to be no winners in this. So if we do resolve this down to the point where Donald Trump is forced to make a decision to unleash the U.S. military, he is also going to unleash a colossal wreck of Southwest Asia, much more deeply, much more widespread, much more long-term and lasting than Iraq was. The old expression, if you like Iraq, wait till you see Iran. It's going to be extremely, extremely bad for both sides. And it's going to be for no purpose. That's the real irritating factor. No purpose. Iran does not represent a threat to anyone in the region that can't handle that threat, as it were. And I don't even think they represent a threat anymore. And it certainly doesn't present a threat to the United States, which is going to be paying a huge burden in coin, treasure, blood, and everything else. lack of focus on the real threat, if there is one, China. It's a recipe for disaster, Nima. And I don't see any cooks. I don't see any chefs. I don't see any master chefs. I don't see anyone who knows what they're doing, including the president of the United States. And now my only hope, Witkoff, has become a vassal of Donald Trump's mercurial, vacillating nature. That is not a recipe for good things.
You mentioned, Larry, the starvation in Gaza. Today, we've learned from Hamas in a press statement. They said no real ceasefire negotiations have taken place since last Saturday. And here is what they said. Netanyahu's statement regarding the entry of aid into the Gaza Strip are merely an attempt to obscure the truth and deceive the international community. They're saying not a single aid truck has entered the Gaza Strip to date. And what's going on, Larry, right now in the mind of the Trump administration? Are they really happy with what's going on in Gaza? Why are they not trying to do anything with Netanyahu? It seems that just it's a total disconnection from the two. Even JD Vance has decided not to go to Israel.
Well, I think that was an additional slap in Netanyahu's face. The first one being, of course, the president not going there. And there was a lot of brouhaha about JD because JD apparently did plan on going there and changed his mind at the last minute, probably because Trump gave him some direction to that. I'd like to think that the president could at least do that. I think what you're seeing right now is a sort of a battle between those who want to do something. And as we were talking about before we went on the air, you're seeing Starmer even postponing negotiations on a new free trade agreement with Israel, calling in the Israeli ambassador and chastising her, doing other things like that. You're seeing others, Canada, France, doing things like that, actually saying that relations are going to have to be revisited if Israel doesn't cease the genocide, doesn't cease the starvation, doesn't allow the Gazans to be fed, to receive humanitarian aid and so forth. So you're getting a slow change in the way the West, if you will, is looking at the situation. And that's positive. It's way long overdue, but it's positive. The question is, does Netanyahu believe that he's got the forces to commit suicide? That's what it really is. Arrayed around him both politically and militarily, which is to say that his coalition can only stay intact, especially vis-a-vis the really extreme right wing, if he keeps the killing going and intensifies it even. And you've got people like Smotrich who have said, supposedly, this was in Haaretz, as I remember, let's starve every one of them. Man, woman, child, let's starve every one of them. Can he do that? Can he keep the IDF together as much as morale has deteriorated in the IDF? And can he perform the operation that he says he's going to perform, called by the Knesset and him a sustained military presence, which is to say a war not unlike the one we fought in Iraq when the insurgency formed around us and pretty much stymied everything we were trying to do, because that's what's going to happen. You're in ideal terrain now. You have made it that way, IDF Air Force. You have made the terrain perfect for urban guerrillas because everything is rubbled now. And you've got lots of artillery rounds and lots of 250 and 500-pound bombs lying around that are duds that you can hook up to firing devices and make improvised explosive devices out of them. And you can knock out Merkava tanks. You can knock out armored personnel carriers. You can kill a lot of people. That's what they're going to do. You got 40,000 new recruits. It takes about a week to train one how to do an IED remotely detonated. Israel is going to lose massive amounts of material and men and shed a lot of blood. And it's not going to make much progress because it's rubbled the territory. That's what kind of war Israel's looking at now. That's a desperate situation for a conventional armed force that's already been at war since October the 7th, almost literally. And it's a very destabilizing situation for that force when you have, they just ordered post-traumatic stress soldiers back into battle. And of course, they're trying to take the ultra-Orthodox in too. As I understand it, it's only about 10,000 of them that answered the call, but they're desperate. They're going to flood them in there. Imagine how that's going to affect morale in the ranks of the IDF, on the ground in particular. So you have huge problems. And Netanyahu seems to think dealing with those problems is damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. I'm going to ram my head into that Gaza wall. And oh, by the way, Lebanon wall and Syria wall until it falls down. And it's going to fall down maybe, but it's going to fall down on him, and it's going to fall down on Israel. Israel is in existential straits right now. And I don't know that the American administration realizes that. I don't know that they appreciate that. If they do and they let them persist, that's one thing. That's a decision. We're going to let Israel collapse. Now, we'll come in and pick them up economically and otherwise, but once they've collapsed, we'll get them to agree to a two-state solution. We'll ram it down their throat. If that's the way they're thinking, a crude way to get there, but better than the alternative. The alternative is that Israel disappears off the face of the earth. And the United States wakes up one morning and goes, well, where did that little acolyte of ours in the Eastern Mediterranean go? It no longer is there. Who are those people pouring all over the state of Israel? Oh, it looks like Arabs. Oh, it looks like some Palestinians. No, it looks like maybe some others who've picked up the call. That's the future we're looking at if somebody doesn't grow a set of, gray matter and get in there and start doing some things. And it looks like the Europeans are growing some gray matter, and Canada. And there are other countries out there, of course, who've been all along supporting the application to the Court of South Africa for a declaration of genocide and doing other things like that all along. And there are people at the UN who've been telling the truth all along. It's about time people who have the capability to do something about it, to really do something about it, wake up. And I think that's a warning. It's way late, but it is happening.
Here is, Larry, what David Lammy, Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, said.
Prime Minister and fellow leaders said yesterday, we cannot stand by in the face of this new deterioration. It is incompatible with the principles that underpin our bilateral relationship. Rejected by members across this House, and frankly, it's an affront to the values of the British people. Therefore, today, I'm announcing that we have suspended negotiations with this Israeli government on a new free trade agreement. We will be reviewing cooperation with them under the 2030 bilateral roadmap. The Netanyahu's government's actions have made this necessary, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today, my honourable friend, the Minister for the Middle East, is summoning the Israeli ambassadors to the Foreign Office to convey this message. I say now to the people of Israel, I want a strong friendship with you based on shared values, with flourishing ties between our people and societies. We are unwavering in our commitment to your security and to your future, to countering the very real threat from Iran, the scourge of terrorism, and the evils of anti-Semitism. But the conduct of the war in Gaza is damaging our relationship with your government. And as the Prime Minister has said, if Israel pursues this military offensive, as it has threatened, failing to ensure the unhindered provision of aid, we will take further action in response.
Yeah.
I wish we could go back about 6 months and play some of his remarks that were glowing and positive and all this. And of course, part of this is the fact that Labor has its lowest ratings in its history. And they understand that there are some people out there in the hustings, for example, who normally would support them, who aren't going to support them ever again because of this situation. And notice how many times he said Netanyahu. They want to pin it on Bibi. They want to be able to have this character out there who's malevolent, bingo, got him, who's decadent, bingo, got him, who's a criminal, bingo, got him, who's a dastardly human being, bingo, got him. But they don't really, except on occasion when they have to, say Israel because they want to have a scapegoat. They want to be able to say when Netanyahu's gone, which is inevitable, then, everything's okay because everything will change. I got news for them. We're just going to go back. If that's the way they're looking at it, we're just going to go back to the same treatment of the Palestinians, only on a low burner instead of a high burner. The fact that it's on the high burner right now and killing men, women, children, destroying hospitals, killing doctors, killing nurses. You've seen the journalist count? The journalist count is sky high. It's almost as bad as the doctor and medical personnel count. But all that said, and all these Europeans and others, including us, deserve the most incredible censure in the world for ignoring this for so long. All that said, at least finally we have people speaking out. And hopefully, the government in Israel, I did not say Bibi, because Bibi does not listen to anybody but his arrogant self, just like Trump. They're two peas in a pod. But there are some people in Israel that might have a modicum of concern about Israel's future, and they might be listening. And I hope they are. And I hope that some changes are coming before they destroy their state, because they are destroying their state.
Larry, getting back to the situation between the United States and Iran, and here is what General Petraeus said about the talks between Iran and the United States.
Why is anybody going to David Petraeus?
Brought into the fold. Do you think there is a chance of Iran also being brought back into the fold?
That's probably a bit over-optimistic, but there's a chance that there could be a nuclear deal that doesn't have some of the shortcomings of the previous nuclear deal that could enable the lifting of sanctions progressively and so forth as confidence is built, and that could lead to them being a more constructive player in the region than they certainly have been for many decades, noting all the damage that has been done by their proxies in this region and still being done by the Houthis, who have still not resolved the issues there. So I think it's an opportunity that all are working as hard as they can to achieve. You can see the narrowing of the differences between the U.S. position and the Iranian position. No enrichment whatsoever is the U.S. opening. Maybe that ends up being for 3 years, and then you have an opportunity to do something smaller. Again, but you can actually see this deal starting to come together. And assuming Iran then also stops some of the terrible activities that they're doing through proxies in the region, which have been so destabilizing, then you can start to see the contours of something that could be much more positive.
Do you think, I'll come to Nabil again in a second, but do you think that regime change is now slightly off the table with Iran? I remember years ago, Rumsfeld always making the point that you had two contradictory aims in Iran. One was regime change, and the other was trying to stop them getting the bomb. And the more you tried to stop them getting the bomb, the more that the population rallied to the regime.
A CIA director learns really quickly that you have to deal with the world the way it is, not the way you'd like it to be. And I never thought that regime change was at all realistic, frankly.
No, at least.
What an admission by David at the end there. I don't know why anyone would turn to Donald Rumsfeld as a source, or for that matter, to David Petraeus as a key interview, because both are thoroughly discredited men. Petraeus in the military is utterly discredited for the lies he told from Iraq, for the things that he did. He's thoroughly discredited for his CIA leadership by people at the CIA even. by people who are the last vestige of good people at the CIA, and he's thoroughly discredited as a diplomat. And Rumsfeld, I won't even talk about. There's enough negative there for me to talk for 20 years. So why would we even consult these people? Because there is such a scarcity, a dearth of intelligent people to go on mainstream media and pontificate. That's another sign of the decay of empire, of the demise of the empire. There are only Neros running around. There are only Catalines running around. And there's no Cicero to rail at them on the Senate floor.